Martin Luther King Jr.'s historic speech, "I Have a Dream," he says this: "I have a dream that my 4 little children will grow up in a nation where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Has his dream become a full reality? We live in a world that strives for freedom and equality. Although this nation has made large strides in making racism a part of history, it is still very prevalent in today's culture, much because of the melting pot that North America has become today. I have had many experiences that have reminded me that racism is still a very real part of society. As a Native American, I have faced many situations where people have said offensive things. As an example, one time trying to get into the United States, I showed my status card to a border guard, and he looked at it and he said, "Oh, are you mad because your government is trying to steal your casinos?" Also, I am minoring in sociology, where in class we have studied what racism is and the effect that it has on people. Racism causes pain, struggle, and doubt in the people that face this unfair treatment. God has created each one of us with an intention, and He calls us to treat each other with love, regardless of the color of people's skin. I will validate this statement, explaining how racism is still, unfortunately, a very relevant part of culture today, that racism creates a less productive society, and that the only solution can be found with love. Beginning with my first point, racism is still, unfortunately, a very relevant part of today's culture. On DoSomething.org in 2012, it was said that 51% of Americans expressed anti-black sentiments in a poll, a 3% increase from 2008, and a survey in 2011 revealed that 52% of non-Hispanic whites have shown anti-Hispanic attitudes. Examples of racism can range from feeling unsafe on an airplane because of a Middle Eastern passenger, a store owner following a black person because they believe their intent is to steal rather than to buy, and a police officer quicker to assume that someone of a minority is up to something. We can look at the highly controversial case of George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. Although Zimmerman was not found guilty of any of these charges, it is widely believed that it was a racist act more so than self-defense. Zimmerman was a 28-year-old man who shot and killed a 17-year-old African-American high school student. It would be unfair to pin this case as a racial motive because the facts are seemingly so unclear. However, it simply goes to show that people still recognize racism as a problem today and that they have a very passionate response to it. My second point is this. That is that racism creates a less productive society. It is no secret that people who face discrimination have to deal with the pain, struggle, and doubt themselves. Each person is created with the potential to benefit society as a whole, and when anyone is brought down, the potential in them has a very strong possibility of not being reached. In Monica Martin's article, it's discussed that discrimination causes people to feel shame and anger. Almost all African American youth have said that they have felt some sort of discrimination, and interestingly, shame and anger have been closely related to crime. Not only does racism bring down the person that is being discriminated, but it also creates an unproductive citizen and the racist as well. My last point is this. A solution for racism can only be found with love. When Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment was, He said to love your God with all your mind, heart, and soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Love is required to abolish racism, because with only love you can meet a person with the understanding and respect that each person deserves. Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes asked Morgan Freeman what the solution to racism was. He plainly said, "Stop talking about it." Very simply put, if people act out of love, racism will not exist. In closing, although it should not be, racism is still a very real part of society today. People have to struggle with it in their daily lives. We must abolish it altogether using the love as a solution in order to be a more productive society and for Christ's commandments to be lived out. Never discriminate against another person based on the color of their skin. God loves us equally and wants us to love one another. When you find yourself in a situation where you can discriminate, remember that Christ commanded us to love your neighbor as yourself. If you see someone acting with a racist motive, intervene and explain to them why it isn't appropriate. Remember that God sees each person equally.